Hello, friends. Welcome to the warm-up lecture for our fourth class, our penultimate class in our series on the dark side. I'm changing up the plan a little bit today. As you see, no PowerPoint. Rather, we're starting with one of the most familiar religious texts in Western culture, Psalm 23. And this is inspired by the question that Christina asked right at the end of our third class when we delve in to the Zohar's extended meditation on anger. And so we were working with that text. And at the very, very end, Christina asked, yeah, but where's evil? What about actual evil? And the answer to that question can indeed be found in that text. I think we weren't challenging ourselves enough. We weren't leaning into it enough. The reason that this conversation is difficult is because I will not allow us to have it about something way over there. For example, if we take as an example the Holocaust, which is arguably the most pervasive flaring of the dark side in recent memory, in terms of extended, perpetual, organized evil. The philosopher Hannah Arendt, when she was present for and reported on and wrote a summary of the trial of Adolf Eichmann, who was the architect of what's known as the final solution. In her write-up of that trial, she wrote about the banality of evil. She basically said, it would be so comforting to Western civilization if I were to tell us that this man, the architect of the final solution, was somehow categorically different from all of us. But nothing could be further from the truth. This was a normal human applying normal human logic that took that logic to an extreme and therefore profoundly evil place. And that's what's framing this conversation too. We are working with the dark side, wrestling with the dark side, trying to come face to face with the dark side in this class, but we're doing it right here, right now, in the world we live in and in ourselves. And so the practice prompt that I gave you to turn inward and to challenge yourself to see the dark and the light and the light and the dark inside of you, inside of your own emotional upwelling. I want to take that prompt and put a finer point on it. The question I'm going to challenge us to face together today and in live session is, where does violence live in me? Because we are drawn towards discussing evil, but evil is an abstraction. Whereas violence, when we watch small children play, we can see that violent tendencies, the move from power to control to abuse, is actually pretty commonplace, pretty widespread among our species, and it lives in us as well. And so the question that we're going to hold at the back of our mind in this warm-up lecture, and we'll return to it again in live session, we're going to save the material on husks for our fifth class. We'll be able to do what I had planned for classes 4 and 5 together next week. But the question that we're going to hold for the entirety of this class 4 is, where does violence live in me? When, how does it flare? We asked this question last week about anger, but I think we need to put a finer point on it. All right, let's turn to some text. So this psalm that you have here on the screen, I'd imagine that it's familiar to you. This is a translation into the English. The Psalms are written originally in Biblical Hebrew, but as you're going to see, the text we're going to return to in the Zohar is actually going to play with a colloquial, non-precise translation, which is featured here, and it's a mistranslation that's that's so common that the Zohar riffs on it. So we begin here. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures. God leads me beside still waters, restores my soul, leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. So this is quite familiar in Christian tradition, imagining Jesus walking right alongside of us. But I'll share with you that in my traditional synagogue, we sing this psalm every Friday night as part of our worship. It's sung around many Shabbat tables in the afternoon in the traditional Jewish world. So this is a piece of liturgical poetry that's beloved the world over. And it also is meant to be a source of comfort as we take on the project that we are wrestling with this in this class, coming face to face with the dark side. And so here, the psalm takes as a given that there are moments in our lives, or perhaps there is this place called the valley of the shadow of death. That's the colloquial mistranslation. Tzalmavet, in the Hebrew here, this is a geographical location in the land of Israel, but the etymology of it sounds so much like the valley of the shadow of death that colloquialism makes it into the translation. Even though I walk in terrain, using the language we've been developing in this class, even though I walk in space of privation, I walk alongside of terrifying possibility, I will not fear, because I know you, source, you, light, are with me. So we are really gonna wade our way into the dark side right now, trying to hold on to that question: where does violence live in me? How does violence become evil? And we're going to return to that text from the Zohar that we were working with last week. I'm going to bring us, this is the identical text to what we were using last week, but this is a different translation. Because we're going to work with the commentary in this translation. The previous one was done by a scholar named Isaiah Tishby. This one is done by a scholar named Danny Matt. And as it should happen, this translation is brand new. You can see these are galleys from Dr. Matt. And I will just take the opportunity to make a small plug. If you just love the study of these texts in the original, Dr. Danny Matt is the scholar. He's a scholar at Stanford University, and he has been the chair of a project to translate again at a much higher level the Zohar from its very challenging, very enigmatic original Aramaic into a much more readable English, and he teaches on Zoom as well. So I've sent students to him before. These classes are dry, and unlike Awakened Body classes that are oriented towards you, your life, and meaning making through these materials, his classes are just for the sake of the study of the text itself. But if that speaks to you, I highly recommend them. And as an expression of gratitude, when Dr. Matt sent me these galleys, I told him I would put a little plug for his classes in the Next Awakened Body newsletter. So you can keep an eye out for that, and you can click on that link if that's something that interests you. So one more note, general note, and we'll talk about this. This is how we'll open live session when I see you on Sunday. One more general note before we dive back into this text on anger. So I raised a question at the end of our third class that we need to just say and one more word about. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I want you to ask yourself right now if you believe that there is a difference between death and evil. I'm going to guess that when I put it plainly like that, your answer is yes, of course, that on some level we know as humans that death is a natural part of, as they say, the human condition is fatal. That part of the reality of life on the earth plane is that we have a lifespan. And I can tell you that generally speaking, we as humans, in our ways of relating to our lives and to assigning value, for most of us, it is only scarcity that creates value, which is to say, it is the very fact that our days are numbered that wakes us up and reminds us that every breath, every moment is precious. And so we know on some abstract level that death is a feature of life, of the human condition. And yet, this question that so many of us hold that likely brought you to this class of why is there evil in the world? How can I make peace with these dynamics of the dark side? Many of us, when death comes calling for us, we feel that that is the presence of the dark side, that is somehow deeply bad or wrong. And so we need to be aware of that collapsing in our own process of making sense, because the fact of death and evil are two totally different things. Evil, the dark side, is a generative force. It can build upon itself, whereas death is simply a term limit. It is the end of life, and from our spiritual perspective that places the soul as primary, as part of source, death is but a doorway. This text, though, we're going to delve into, we're going to zoom in on a different place than we did last week. We're going to talk about the angel or the devil, Samael, who comes riding in on a camel. This text is going to talk with us about the angel of death, and so it will answer some of these questions for us about the difference between the angel of death and the Sitra Achra, the dark side. Here, what I call the dark side, this translation is calling the other side. The other side is the literal translation of the Aramaic Sitra Achra, one and the same. Okay, so we're starting just a little bit further up than we did last week. And the context here is this is how the Zohar teaches us. This is how it makes meaning. It is going to begin by expounding upon verses in the Hebrew Bible, in what I call the Torah. And so here we're within the story of the building of what's called the Mishkan, the tabernacle. What's so beautiful about the word Mishkan is that it is a relative of the Zohar's word for the goddess, Shekhinah, Mishkan, Shekhinah, same word. And so we're on the simple level of the story that the Zohar is telling is that there is a construction project going on during the period of time when the ancient Israelites are walking through the desert. They spend a period of 40 years in the desert during the time between when they were slaves in Egypt and when they take up residence in the Holy Land. And during those 40 years, they build a tabernacle, a sacred meeting place with God. And there, as they travel, Moses will enter the Mishkan, and the cloud of glory will come to dwell upon it, and there he'll receive prophecy, and then the cloud will ascend, and the people will keep moving. So that is the simple story that the Zohar is opening with here. But because we're talking about building a sacred container, the Zohar is going to use that as an opportunity to discuss the world of Yesh and the world of Ayin. So here, this text is going to talk about erecting, building. And anytime that we're talking about building, we're in the world of Yesh, the world of light, the world of isness, as contrasted by the dark side, the other side. And what we're going to see in this text is that this text, because this is a teaching from the Zohar, knows that in equal measure, whenever there is building happening in the world of Yesh, there is a counter process happening in the world of Ayin, and yet we as creatures of the light always want to be inclining towards the light, living, dwelling within the light, prioritizing the light. And so this text is going to take us through that. We're going to take two different passes at this text. First, I'm going to just do an extended reading of the text from the Zohar. You're going to be able to follow along with me here on the screen, but that's not what I recommend. The Zohar is a text, it's esoteric, which is to say it is told, it's far closer to poetry than prose, and it is speaking deeply within the language of metaphor. I believe that the best way to quote unquote follow along with this text is to just close your eyes, almost take it as a guided meditation. Let me tell you a story, which is reading from this text. Now, if you know yourself and you're not going to process, if you're not reading along, then that's why you have the words here to read along. But I would really recommend that you close your eyes and let me just tell you this story. And then you might even pause the video, go back and do it again. Just let these words wash over you, almost like a guided meditation. Once I've read the entire extended section from the Zohar, then we'll come back together here on the screen, and I'm going to show you a little bit of commentary here as a way of answering some of these core questions. Okay, the Zohar loves to begin a story by saying, "Come and see." Moses erected this side of holiness, and the other side of impurity sank. He conveyed to this side of holiness, and the impure other side weakened. He set up this side of holiness, and this other side of impurity was subdued. Then he had inserted its bars, then he erected. Why? So that beginning and end would be erection. He began with erecting and concluded with erecting, because beginning and end entirely demand erection. Beginning, so that on the other side is weakened, thereby erecting the side of holiness, so that it may endure and rise above, becoming a single bond fittingly. For whenever holiness ascends, impurity sinks low. The head of the point standing beneath the rungs of the other side is head of the outside rung, head of the male, astride a certain camel, head of confusion, of darkness, spreading. For when smoke issues from fierce wrath, that smoke spreads, wrath after wrath, one upon another, one riding and ruling the other, appearing as male and female, becoming all a furious wrath. As smoke begins to spread, it pushes from within the wrath through the pressure of one point, spreading. Then the smoke of wrath spreads twistingly, like a serpent skilled in doing evil. The head emerging to spread is a dark rung, ascending and descending, roaming about and resting in its place. The rung endures, settling out of that smoke, issuing from wrath. It is shadow. A shadow over another place called death. And when the two of them join as one, it is called shadow of death. As we have established, there are two rungs joining as one. This shadow is beginning of the lower point outside, dark, far removed from the holy point existing in the middle. This is a point that does not exist and is not distinguished by color. From it spreads an expansion outward, downward, and it sinks, unseen, unmarked. This spreads below to the right and to the left, expanding in the middle within dense darkness, 1,100 thick cords engraved on this side of that. The darkness spreads in a color black and not black, for it has no color in which to endure. Within that expansion exists darkness. Those that functioned in Egypt, as it is written, no one saw his fellow, and it is written, a darkness one can feel. All right, so I'm going to stop the reading there, and if you have time, I really do recommend that you go back and listen again as many times as you need. As you can hear, this text is working with the evolution that we've been talking about. The evolution from building and therefore consequentially, in that we create in the world of yes, consequentially there is a counter reaction in the world of ayin. Here it's using the language of holiness and impurity, but that is just the nature of the earth plane, the nature of the way the great artist who is God creates. And then as that process unfolds, there is the birth of darkness, the existence of darkness. That darkness has a certain character to it. And then the text is going to introduce us to two different features, what it refers to as the male and the female. These are two demonic forces. The male name is known as Samael. The female name is known as Lilith. And as you can see, it is only when Samael is the angel of death, only when the angel of death is fused with Lilith. This is the same sacred union that, for example, when we work with Tiferet and Kabbalah of the body, and we say that Kabbalists make the positive affirmation before fulfilling any sacred action. I am doing this sacred action for the sake of the cosmic unification of Tiferet and Shekhinah. This is the same parallel union, but in the side of the demonic. And it's only when that union happens that we get the existence of something else, not darkness, not impurity, but rather evil. So we'll just learn a little bit from the commentary here. In any case, behind this paragraph, In any case, behind this paragraph lies the notion that the forces of evil originate in the sphira of Gvura or Din, which expresses divine wrath. The smoke of this fiery wrath pushes outward, breaks through the boundary of holiness, then spreads twistingly, dispersing evil. The emergence of the demonic point corresponds to the emergence of the primordial point of Chokhmah. So we're not going to jump to this other reference, but that the dark side emerges from Din, as we've been discussing, and that it takes on a life of its own. And then that is parallel to the sort of creative process of ordering that we've been talking about when we talk about Tohu and Vohu, that ordering process happens in Chokhmah, which is where we language. Now let's talk a little bit about Samael and Lilith, the head emerging to spread. Samael, the dark masculine head, is called shadow, and beneath him is Lilith, identified with the angel of death. Together, this demonic couple forms the shadow of death. In its simple sense, the biblical term Tzalmalvet means gloom or darkness. But according to popular folk etymology, it combines two Hebrew words, the word for tzel, shadow, and the word for death, mavet. Thus, it is understood here as the shadow of death. This shadow is beginning. The shadowy Samael is the beginning of the demonic point, far removed from Shekhinah. This is, if you look back up at the source, it's going to tell us that there is a point, and far removed from that point is the shadow. So Samael is far from Shekhinah, who is the holy point existing in the middle. The demonic point is so dark that its color cannot be determined, and its very existence is unclear. Demonic energy emanates from this point, spreading in various directions, while the point itself sinks and disappears. So this is where we're going to leave things for our lecture today. And when we pick up in live session, we're going to dive into these three big ideas, big questions that I raised for us today. The first, how do I, in my working understanding of the world, distinguish between death, or maybe even the angel of death, and evil? How are they different? And how do I need to be careful and disciplined about when it is that I am coming face to face with death, but how that might be different from evil? And I say this knowing that some of us in this group have come face to face with death, and I say that with tremendous compassion. And, some kinds of death do involve evil, and other kinds of death don't involve evil. So we're going to don't involve evil, and so we'll just tread very, very lightly and with profound tenderness as we face that question in live session. The second question that we're going to wrestle with is, where does violence live in me? Can I track this evolution from privation to shadow, to deepening darkness, to a darkness that builds upon itself and creates evil? And then we'll talk a little bit more about this aspect that this text is opening up for us, which is the realm of the demonic. And I'll teach you a little bit about Lilith and about the Kabbalah's associations between the dark side and the feminine side, because you think you all know that I teach a class on angels. There's plenty of material I could teach a class on demons, but a wide subsection of the Kabbalah's demonology is directly connected to Kabbalah's statements about the feminine, and so those are not sources that I lift up and teach to my primarily female students. All right, we're going to leave it there for today. I will see you in live session.